Hello, we've had a request to have a look at an extreme killer Sudoku published on a website online. I'll put the link in the description to this video. And yeah, so I thought we'd take a look. I'm always a bit wary of these sites that publish regular killer Sudokus. I've had bad experiences with them in the past because often they're just computer generated puzzles and they have no elegance at all, and they are just very, very, very hard to sort of make any sort of logical progress with. But anyway, let's have a look at this one and see what we can see. So, well, the first thing I can see is that I should be able to write in this number here. How can I do that? Well, you can see if we draw an imaginary line after row 4 of the grid, so along this line here, then there are lots and lots of cages entirely contained above that imaginary line. And in fact, only this cell here would stick out below that line. Now, we know that each row of a Sudoku puzzle will add to the number 45 because it will contain the numbers from 1 to 9 exactly once. If you add up the numbers from 1 to 9, you get 45. So I know that all 4 rows here above my imaginary line are going to add up to 180. Now, therefore, I should be able, by adding all the totals of every cage here, I'll get a number bigger than 180 by the value of this number. And that means we can do a little trick, actually. We don't actually have to add the tens columns. We can just add the units columns. And whatever we end up with will, in effect, be the value of this cell. So let me show you what I mean. So we've got 15 here, so that's 5. Plus 7, that gives us 12. But I'm going to ignore the 10, so that gives us 2. 35, so that's going to be 7. 15 again, so again that's a 5, so that's going back to 2. 7, 4, 6, stays at 6, goes to 0, goes to 6 again. So I know that actually all of those cages added to 186 now, and therefore this must be a 6 in order to ensure that everything above that line adds to 180, which we know it must do. Those are just a little trick here. Now, in terms of other things I can see, well, you can see this 7 cage. That's going to have to be 1, 2, and 4. It's the only way of making 7 in 3 cells. So let's put that in. I know this 22 cage contains a 9, but I can't see how to use that. You see this 3 cell has to be 1 and 2 in some order, and the bottom row of the grid contains the numbers 5, what's that, a 16 and a 15, so that's 36. So I know this cell and this cell are going to sum to 9 somehow, but that's not a terribly useful number because there are so many ways of making 9 in 2 cells. Obviously we've got 1, 8, 2, 7, 3, 6 and 4, 5. So we're not really eliminating many possibilities for this cell and this cell other than knowing they don't contain a 9. Now, similarly with this 3x3 cage at the bottom here, I can see the value of this cell and the value of this cell are 31, 36, also going to be equal to 9, because if I add 15 and 16 and 5 together, I get 36, which means this cell have to be 9 as well. So I suppose all I am doing here is I'm limiting the number of cells that can contain a 9 in this box. So far it could be here, here, or here, or here. Okay, it's not going to take us any further. Oh, look, there's a 4 cell there, 1, 3, 1, 3 again. This 35 cage is interesting in 5 cells. Those of you who do a lot of Kukuru puzzles will know that 35 in 5 cells, where all the numbers have to be different, has to be 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. That's the only way of making 35 in 5 cells. So let's fill that in and see if that shows us anything interesting. This is a little bit slow having to do this manually like this. try and edit this out of the video later. Okay, so we can now see we still need a 3 somehow in this top 3x3 box. It can't go here, because if it went here, this cell would have to contain a 12. So clearly the 3 is over on the left hand side. Let's put that in. So this, the other two numbers in this 15 cage will have to sum to 12 without using 3, 9, because we can't have a repeated 3 in this cage. So it's either going to be 3, 4, 8 or 3, 5, 7. Okay, so that's interesting, isn't it? Because now you can see something has happened in this box. And that is, we have to ask ourselves, where can we place the 1 and the 2 in this box? Neither the 1 nor the 2 can go here. And there's only 2 other cells that can contain the 1 and the 2. So in fact, we now know that that's going to have to look like this. Which means we can remove the 4 from that cell there. Okay, now is that of any use at all? Well, it gives us a 1, 2 double in column 3, which means that this 5 cage here now has to be 3, 4 in this order, and that means this is a 1 or a 2, so that gives us another 1, 2 double down column 2 now as well. Now, no, okay. I was about to wonder whether I could use that bottom cage again, but I don't think I can. Now the next thing we can do is we can work harder on this box again, because we know we need to put a 4 somewhere. And the 4 cannot go here. Now the 4 can go over here, but if it goes over here, then this 15 cage has to be 3, 4 and 8. The 5, 7 is ruled out now, which is nice, so that gives us a little bit more to play with. Move the 8 from here now, so this is 3, 4, 8, so this cannot contain an 8 anywhere. So this cell here is 6, 7 or 9, which means this is 6, 9 or 8 in some order. Now, we've got an 8 in one of these 3 cells. Now that affects this 35 box, because obviously we can see there's no 8 in these 3 cells, there's no 8 here, so this has to be an 8. It's the only place an 8 can go. Big 8 allows us to remove this 8 here, which allows us to remove this 7 here. Now that might be helpful. Okay, so this 15 cage now is 6 and 9. Okay. Now we can do some arithmetic here. We've got 15 plus 7 is 22. Plus 15 is 37, plus 35 is 72. So I know that the sum of this cell, this cell, this cell, and this cell must be the difference between 72 and 45, which is 27. Now this cell is a 4, so in fact these 3 cells here must be 6, 8 and 9 in some order, because they must add to 23. So I can remove the 5 and the 7 there. Now that might be interesting. So the 6 and 9, so the 5 and 7 have to be in these 3 cells. Now can we make further use of this? And then there's a fairly simple deduction. Obviously now we have this 15 cage, which is 6 and 9. 6 and 9 is interfering now with this 15 cage. there are two ways of making 15 in two cells, 6 and 9, which we've just seen, or 7 and 8. Well, obviously this cannot be a 6 and 9 variation now. This has to be 7, 8. Obviously, if this was 6 or a 9, it would clash with this. So this is 7 and 8 now, which is interesting in and of the fact that, well, firstly, let's just use this 8 on this box here. This has to be an 8, this has to be a 7, which means this has to be a 7. I think it might be possible at least to use this 9, the fact this is a 9 and this is a 9. I'm just wondering if we can make some progress with that now, especially as a 6 is also ruled out in this column. So, I mean, this can't be a 1 and it can't be a 2 because that would make this a 7 or an 8. 3 would make this a 6, which looks possible. 4 would make this a 5. Again, I can't see why that would be ruled out. 5 would make it a 4, that's not possible. 6 would make it a 6 is impossible. 7, 8, 9. So actually this has to be a 3 or a 4, doesn't it, I think? Now that being the case, this has to be a 5. We need to put a 5 in the column somewhere. That's a 5. And that's a 7. Well, we've got 3, 4, 3, 4 combination, so I'm not sure actually why a 4's appeared down here. I think there should have been a 4 in there. I think that was a 1 and a 2, and we convinced ourselves of that earlier. So now you can see this 16 cage needs to contain a 9. And there's something we can do with that, I think. I know there isn't. Bother. Okay, so 9 here means the other two cells have to add to 7 without using 3 and 4. So whatever is not used in the 1, 2, 5, 6 combination here will be used in here instead. But we have 3 and 4 in these two positions, and 3 and 4 somewhere down in these three cells. So we need a 3 and a 4 here and here, so we can fill those in. And now, in order to make the arithmetic work, this is now the arrangement that will have to fall out from that. 6, 9. I feel like we're very close to breaking this puzzle open, but we haven't quite done it yet. That's the other thing we could note is that the bottom row, we said this cell and this cell have to sum to 9, so this cannot take a 9. So what are the options here? This can be 1, 2, can't be 3 or 4, could be 5, could be 6, I think, can't be 7, 8 or 9, so this cell here has to be 7, 8, 4, or 3. Not particularly useful. Oh, but hang on. We can just put a 7 into this box here. This can only be a 7 now, because it's the only place a 7 can go. Now this 15 cage now needs to be a 6 and a 9 variation, which means that we can put the 9 in here and the 6 here. That might be useful. Or we can write 9s into one of these two positions, which is, I think, as far as we can go with that, which is a shame. This 22 cage up here needs to contain a 9, and we have a 9 here. So the 9 is forced over into this right hand 3x3 box. Might be useful in due course. Now, and we're here in this bottom 3x3 box. We have 15 plus 12 is 27, sorry. Plus 7 is 34. So this cell and this cell have to sum to 11. This cell can't take a 9. And this cell can't take a 9 because look, we identified earlier there was a 9 in one of these two cells. And obviously neither of these cells can be a 9. And we can't put a 9 in this 12 cage either. Because if we did, the minimum number we've got to add to this is a 3. So there would be a 9 plus a 3. That's already 12. The other cell couldn't be 0. So in fact, I think the 9 has to go in this 15 cage. Now that's very helpful because actually we already have 6 in column 7. So this I think has to be a 6 and this has to be a 9. And that's going to be useful for a few reasons. Firstly, we can eliminate this 6 and this 3. Secondly, we can place the 9 at the top now into this square here, and therefore into this cell here. Okay, what next? Now we know this cell and this cell sum to 11, but we've already got a 6 and a 9 in this cage now, so that rules out the 9-2 variation and the 5-6 variation and leaves us with just the 4-7 and the 3-8. Now that is in fact interesting because look, we've got to fill a 7 cage separate from this 11 that we've identified. We need to fill a 7 cage here, and we have a 6 here, so this can only be either 3 and 4 or 2 and 5. Now we've just said that whichever variation of the 11 it turns out to be, it'll either use a 3 or it'll use a 4. Therefore we cannot have both the 3 and the 4 being used up in this 7 cage. This 7 cage has got to be 2 and 5. And that is going to, I think, be the critical step to solving this puzzle. Let's see. So now this has to be a 6. And this must be a 1. This is a 9. This is a 6. And this is a 9. So that's all looking quite favourable, isn't it? Now, this can't be a 1 anymore. Therefore, this can't be an 8. And look at that. We now have a 4 and a 7 in this cell. Therefore, this 11 combination cannot be 4 and 7 because otherwise this cell couldn't be filled. So it's going to have to be, I think, 3 and 8, which means this has to be a 3 and this has to be an 8, which means we've got 1, 4, 9 across these middle cells. So let's fill those in just for the sake of good order. In fact, you can see this can't take a 9. If this took a 9, the other two cells would have to add to 2, which is impossible. So the 9 is forced now into this cell, which gives us a 9 here. This 8 means these two cells are very restricted. This is 2 and 5 in some order. Again, I feel like we're very close to a solution now. 7, 8, 3, 4. So we can now place the 9 in this bottom box. And what do we need? We need a 2 and a 5 into these positions. Yeah. Okay. Which means that this is a 1. This is a 4. This is a 3, therefore this must be a 6. So that's still working, looks quite good. We've got 1, 4, 7 to place in row 8 still. Let's fill in the options here. So 1, 4, 7, 7, 7, like that. Now you can see immediately, hopefully, that if this is 1, 4, 1, 4, they would add to 5. That would make this a 6. That's impossible. So in fact, the 7 is going to have to appear in this cell in order to force that not to be true, which means this has to be a 7 down here. It's the only place left for a 7. That means this is the 2 and this is the 5, which means this is a 2 and this is a 4, which means this is a 1 and this is a 3. So it still looks like it's working. 3, 4, 5, 8 to place across there. Let's just fill those in and I'll show you the consequences of that. So 5, 8, 5, 8, 5, 8, 5, 8, 5 and 8 add to 13, plus the 9 plus the 3 is 25. This cell has to be a 2. Again, that looks like it's working. So taking some comfort from the fact that I think all our logic is consistent with the correct solution, which is pleasing. It gives us an 8 here. Yeah, I think we're nearly there. So now there's an 8 over on this side. We can do some more arithmetic now actually on column 9, because we've got these two cells. So that's 14 plus 10 is 24. Plus 16 is 40, so I know this cell and this cell have to sum up to 5. And you can see that means this cell has to be a 1 and a 4. Which is looking, and this must be 4 and 8. Obviously, if you're working on paper now, this gets very quick, but unfortunately with a tracker pad and my clunky fingers, it still takes a little bit of time. Now, so this is a 7 here. You can see that means simple Sudoku rules. This has to be a 7. That means this is a 6 by arithmetic. This box is quite interesting now. So we have 25 plus 10, so that's 35. So I know these two cells have to sum to 10. So it's either going to be 4 and 6, which is impossible, 1 and 9, which is impossible, 2 and 8 is possible, but no, it's not, because we already have a 2 and an 8 in column 6. So in fact, this has to be 3 and 7, which means this has to be 7. And this has to be 3. Makes this a 3 by Sudoku rules. And we've got 5 and 8 left to place, which we can't resolve yet. So let's put those in as options. 5, 8, 5, 8, like that. See, we've got one number left to fill in column 8 there, column 7, sorry. This has to be what's a 5, which means this is a 5 and this is a 6. 6, 6, 6, that means this is a 6. We've got 2 and 8 to place, which means this has to be the 2 and this has to be the 8, because we already have a 2 in one of those two positions. Means this is a 3, this is a 5, which resolves this down here, 5 and 8 now, which makes this an 8, this an 8, this a 4, this a 4. What have we got now? We've got, that must be a 3. 1 and 2 to position here, that's got to be this way round. Be a 4, 1, 2 and 5 to place. This has to be the 1, this has to be the 2, 2, 5. I think it's still working, and there we go. So a very difficult but very nice puzzle actually. I enjoyed that. That was a lot better than I was expecting. I hope this was a useful run through and you got something out of watching me solve it. If you did, please do subscribe to the channel. We really appreciate it. And we'll be back soon for another edition of Cracking the Cryptic. Thanks for watching.